Your friends and family, do they think you're nuts for coming here?
So the only images and videos and information they get about Russia is on the mainstream media, right? Whether it's BBC, CNN, you know, wherever.
Do you understand why, in their eyes, in the eyes of Western governments, you are a threat to their way of existence?
In London, you have to be so careful, even in the middle of the day, just having your phone out.
You were part of the British government. You had your businesses in the UK. I mean, do you feel like you've gone to the other side? Do you feel like you're betraying your country by doing this?
It's just not the same as it once was, you know, because growing up, I thought the UK was an incredible place. I felt proud to be British. They look to a country like Russia and think, actually, that's a place where I want to bring my children up, actually knowing that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and you've got politicians here that aren't scared to say that. You know, the UK, politicians can't even say this in public. They're asked on the news, what is a man? They can't say.
From what I can tell, that's not... From what I can tell, it's extremely windy and the camera's falling. Hold on. Apparently, that camera shuts off, so everything's going to be on this camera, and I'm going to be behind the scenes. Hi everyone, my name is Stan, and welcome to A Russian Opinion. It's your friendly neighborhood, almost Russian propagandist, I guess, making another video with Philip. Philip is from the UK, and he moved to Russia not too long ago. He's here to tell us his story, and also, you know, Philip, make sure you do plug in the name of your channel. If anything, ladies and gentlemen, the channel link will be in the description below, so you can always go and visit his channel. I have no idea what kind of videos he makes, so you know what? Go there and judge for yourself. And subscribe if you like his videos. Anyways, Philip, thank you very much for reaching out, and welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm from the UK, of course, from an area of the UK called Essex, just outside of London. Lived there most of my life growing up until I was about sort of 18, 19, when I started to realise that the UK wasn't all that it seemed. I set a business up in the UK when I was about 18, and in my early 20s, sort of 2021, I started looking for other sort of alternatives to life in the UK because everything was going downhill. I was having a look at other countries in the world, and it seemed like a better place to be able to travel and experience something else. Now, I'm not talking about Russia at that point, but I ended up moving out to Asia. So I spent a few years in Hong Kong, and spending a better time between Hong Kong, mainland China, and Singapore. And then just before the pandemic, things started getting a little bit bad in that part of the world, and started looking at other options, as did quite a lot of expats that were sort of in Asia at that time. Two places for especially the Hong Kong people started coming up. It was either Singapore or Dubai, and I chose Dubai. So I sort of moved, obviously, from the UK out to Asia for a while, Asia to Dubai. It was in that period where I still had the UK business operating, so I was spending quite a lot of time traveling between Dubai and the UK. And during one of my trips in the UK, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I still don't know why I took this particular flight, it must be fate, but I took a flight on Aeroflot from London to Asia with a stop in Sheremetyevo, and I was in the lounge sort of playing around with my phone, you know, some of the apps, matched with a Russian woman. And on that particular trip, I was actually going out to Asia for about a week and a half. And over that time, I was chatting to, well, the person who would become my wife, but I'm sure we'll get to that. And the following week, I actually realised from the app, I thought she was based in London because her profile said London, because she spent a lot of time in the UK, studied there, etc., and just didn't change her profile. So I was like, I'll meet you up when I'm back in London next week. It turns out she was in Moscow. So I said, no worries, I'll go to the embassy and I'll come to Moscow the next week and take you on a date. So that's sort of where my interest in terms of Russia was triggered. I hadn't thought about Russia at all. Of course, in the Western countries, there's so much negative propaganda towards Russia, and you know, Russia's always the bad guy somewhere in the Western media. So for me, you know, a British guy, it was never sort of on the agenda. But after coming here for the first time in 2019, it really opened my eyes to somewhere completely new, somewhere completely different, and everything that I had sort of grown up to know about life in Russia was just, you know, totally different. So took her on a first date, and obviously that progressed. That was just before lockdown, so you know, end of 2019 in December actually, and then obviously January the world went into lockdown, the borders were closed. I think the borders in Russia were shut for about 6 to 8 months. So
yeah, something like that. I moved here in 2019. So when you first started coming here, I moved back with my family. But in the UK, you were also a politician. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've been heavily involved with the Conservative and Unionist Party for most of my adult life, on and off. Got involved, you know, quite a bit more seriously in 2018, 2019, when I was spending a lot more time in the UK, and I actually stood as a candidate for the Conservative Party in the 2024 election, and worked quite a bit with quite a few high-profile politicians to run some of their campaigns for either the leadership campaign or the general election that we went into in 2024. Of course, we lost that election. The Labour Party took over in 2024, which I think had quite a big impact on me personally and my wife, because we actually got married in the UK in Westminster last October, and we were planning to be based there. We weren't actually planning initially to come to Russia at all. Obviously, you know, in terms of visiting and stuff, but actually to live, it wasn't really on the agenda, because at that time I still had political ambitions. I still had a property development company in the UK, so I needed to be a bit more hands-on, a bit more focused in terms of what was going on there. The new party, the new government came into power, completely overturned and rejected that decision to actually sort of renew that marriage visa that she initially got onto the spousal visa. So that's when we had no choice but to look for other options, because she effectively got given 28 days to leave the country. She got the decision on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, which was really, really bad timing. You know, they couldn't have picked a better day really to let us know some bad news. And they even offered her 300,000 rubles if she signs an agreement not to go back to the UK for 5 years. Of course, she didn't do that, but it's just shocking what the British tax money is being spent on. I mean, I didn't know that was even a thing or even an offer. So that's what sort of got us to this point. And yes, there could have been other options, I guess. We could have moved to Dubai. We could have gone, you know, to other places. You know, we chose Russia because she's got quite a bit of family here. I did really like Russia from the several trips that I'd made to that point. I wanted to try something new. I also found out about the 702 scheme throughout all of that process as well, which obviously made that process of moving here for me much easier.
But overall, the process itself, I mean, it is quite difficult. No, let's be honest here. It's not the easiest process to immigrate to Russia, you'd say?
It's not the easiest process if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing, it is much easier now in terms of the relaxation of regulations. So I don't know if people know this, but in August of last year, President Putin issued a decree effectively called the 702 decree, which enables a sort of fast-track residency process for foreigners from unfriendly countries. So if you're from the US, Canada, Australia, most of the EU and the United Kingdom, you can effectively write a letter to the embassy in your home country and say, you know, I'm against the woke culture of the West, and I align myself with traditional values of the Russian Federation. The ambassador or someone similar within the embassy will then interview you, and the decision is then in the name of the ambassador. That's sort of what it says on the visa. And you come here, you're given 3 months to then change that entry visa into a temporary residence visa, which you obviously get granted for 3 years. The big key difference there is that as a foreigner, you used to have to know the Russian language and take a test on the history and the laws of Russia.
Correct.
In order to obtain a TRP under that original kind of quota sort of entry for that TRP. Under the new the 702 scheme, that's been completely abolished. So there's no more quota, and you don't have to speak Russian, and you don't have to know anything about the laws or the culture or history or anything.
But I mean, you speak a bit of Russian? You started learning recently, or what?
No, well,
I know it's difficult, but you know what I mean?
yeah, look, yes, I know a little bit, 1 or 2 words maybe.
Okay, cool. Well, and you've been here for how long?
3 months.
3 months.
Look, I need to start lessons. I keep telling myself I'm going to. I am for sure. I've been a bit spoiled in the way that, you know, my wife's English is perfect. Most of the sort of circle of people I'm around, their English is perfect. So I need to get out there more, I guess, and speak to people that don't perhaps speak my own language, because that's gonna sort of encourage a bit more.
You've been here for 2 months. You're starting to learn Russian, so I guess you're a bit of a novichok, basically. In Russian, that means a new guy, basically, or somebody who's new. I know in the UK it means something entirely different. There's a bit of a dark humor there, which we will get into a little bit later, a bit more into politics. But I really want to get your opinion on the subtle key differences that you find between Moscow and, let's say, London. I don't know, are you from London or Manchester, Birmingham?
Like I said at the opening clip, I'm from Essex, so it's pretty much, it's a commuter town. It's like, you know, living in, you know, Bootova, I guess, here, or, you know, something like that, about 30, 40 minutes outside of the city, to the south of London.
All right, cool. So, which means you've been to London quite often, right?
Oh, of course,
yeah.
all the time. Yeah, I used to work there.
I've been to London. I know the subtle differences, but because of my clear bias, because I was born in Russia, a lot of my subscribers, the Russian ones and the non-Russian ones, don't believe me when I clearly show, you know, what London looks like now, unfortunately, because it used to be a lot better and cleaner and safer. But I mean, in your opinion, now that you've been here, you've seen Moscow during the day, during the night, I mean, do you find that it's safer here or as dangerous as Western media portrays it to be?
Yeah, so this is one kind of massive point, really. So on coming to Russia, people had a lot of concerns. Most people in European cities, you know, whether it's London, whether it's the EU, even, you know, US and Canada, they have not been to Russia. So the only images and videos and information they get about Russia is on the mainstream media, right? Whether it's BBC, CNN, you know, wherever. Like, those are the kind of media outlets that they're hearing about Russia from. And it's completely different to how any of that international media portrays it. You know, the first time coming here, I was anxious. I remember sitting on the plane. And a lot of foreigners that I speak to here, by the way, have the same sort of view when they came here for the very first time. You're just thinking all sorts. You're thinking, you know, military, and you know, just you know, heavily armed people at the airport, and are they, the stern faces, and are they going to grill me and where I've come from, and all the rest of it. And you kind of get so nervous about coming in, and then you come here and you realise that there was none of that. I mean, obviously there is a bit more now for obvious reasons, but back then You know, there wasn't. You came straight through. Everything was good. And what you notice about the city straight away is how safe and clean it is. And even now in today's Russia, you know, it's not, you know, worn tour Russia, what, you know, a lot of the world thinks it is. It's business as usual. You know, people are out and about, people enjoying themselves, the restaurants and bars are full usually. People aren't really talking about what's going on a few hundred miles or a few thousand miles away, probably in the border towns and cities of Russia. You know, it's clean here, it's safe here. You know, in London, you have to be so careful, even in the middle of the day, just having your phone out, you know, or putting your phone to your ear. Because
or wearing a nice watch. I've heard that you shouldn't be wearing nice watches in London.
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, you just lose it, or you'll have your wrist cut off, or worse. You know, it's absolutely crazy. You know, like, it's not a safe place to live. I mean, I've lived in Dubai. Of course, Dubai, everyone knows, is super safe. Hong Kong was the same. Hong Kong, Singapore, these sorts of places. I would compare Russia most to these places. It's super safe. Even my wife, she can go out any time of night, completely fine. Obviously, like anywhere, there's going to be good places and bad places. I haven't ventured into any bad places yet, but everywhere I've seen it, it's just, you know, they're nice communities, and we feel super safe there. You know, the other thing as well, like London, it's increasingly dirty, like dirt everywhere. You know, things are broken and they're not fixed. And I was talking to my wife the other day, we're walking through the forest near where we live. I'm saying to her, look, why are the roads being fixed? They look pretty much new. Why are they spending money on this? And she's like, well, every year they renovate these roads. You know, they're sorting out these problems before it's even a problem. You know, they're spending money on the right things. If that was the UK, there'd be potholes everywhere. It would just be completely crumbling and falling apart before we even consider spending money on something. So it's going downhill in pretty much every sense of the word. And it really upsets me when people like Keir Starmer come out and say, look, you know, we're going to commit for the next 100 years to give Ukraine £3 billion of the taxpayers' money for 100 years. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 50 years, right?
It's amazing that you can promise something for 100 years. And believe me, we'll get to that, because I have a couple of questions.
Exactly. The reason I was saying that, though, just very quickly, compared, you know, we're paying that sort of money to Ukraine, right? Sort your problems at home out first, you know, because the UK is not okay. You know, there's rubbish everywhere. There's homelessness pretty much everywhere you look in London. You know, people can't feed their families. People can't heat their homes.
And I have a question about that, actually. But before we go and talk about that, it's interesting because you mentioned in the beginning, you had this idea that when you would be flying into Russia, you'd see people with weapons, so armed guards, right, in the airport, which is quite normal. But it's also normal for Europe as well. I've flown throughout Europe, and I've been to the US and Canada, and it's quite normal to see people with an MP5, an HNK, whatever, walking around with a submachine gun to ensure the safety of people. So it's interesting that when you're in Europe, you don't even notice that, you as a European, right? But when flying into Russia, you automatically thought, oh, there's going to be people walking around with guns. Well, you have the same thing in Europe, but it seems to be that you're used to that and you've accepted that. But Russia, because you've been fed this idea that we're this horrible place, the idea of guards with machine guns or submachine guns at the airport makes you nervous. Do you find that a bit strange?
It's super weird. It's because of the meaning. I mean, you think, you know, USSR, Iron Curtain, the Gulag, you know, all of these kind of like things are in your head, thinking, oh, it's a scary place, when you're quite right. It's probably, you know, a similar comparison to that, for example, is apparently Russia's the bad guy for holding foreigners for hours and hours and hours at the airport at the moment when they come into the country, and it's a violation of human rights, it's this, that and the other. If this is the UK, which by the way, the same thing happens in the UK. I mean, I know many Russian people at the moment, or even British people that have Russian passports that go to the UK, that are held for many, many hours for questioning, for interrogations. When the UK does it, it's seen as a national security issue and they're doing it for national security. When Russia does it, it's a violation of human rights. I don't really understand why everything that Russia does, which is exactly the same as the West does, it's seen in a totally different light.
And I'll be asking you that question to get your opinion as a politician, but you've touched upon an interesting subject, because not everyone in Russia does believe that every year between 20 and 30,000 British citizens, pensioners, this is according to British news, and I could be getting the stats wrong, freeze to death because they can't pay for heating. Is that a myth, or is that actually true?
No, it's completely true. It's completely true. And that's why when you see money being spent stupidly, you're thinking, hang on a minute, this isn't right. Because there's about three things to mention here. So there's the money being spent stupidly on the war. There's the fact that we're kicking out good people who would really add to the country. You take my wife, for example. She studied in the UK, speaks the language fluently, integrated with society, friends and family that live there. All the positive things that you want from someone to go to the country, they're saying, actually, we don't want you. Yet, if she just went to France and hopped in a little dinghy and came over as an illegal immigrant, she'd be put in a 5-star hotel and pretty much treated like a VIP and given a subsidy and set up on a path to citizenship. You need to sort out the fundamental issues first, and you need to deal with, good immigration versus bad immigration. There's a reason why in the UK you're waiting 2 to 3 years for a basic operation, or you're waiting 3 to 4 weeks to get a normal GP appointment in most towns and cities. You just can't get them. And it's because the public services in the country are so overwhelmed and so strained by people that come to the country and sponge off the government. People come to the country and they expect to get handouts from the government. They expect not to work. They don't want to contribute, At least I, as a foreigner here, expect that if I come into your country and I'm given a resident permit and all the rest of it, I expect to contribute and give back to society and to give tax money and create jobs and all the rest of it. That expectation isn't there in the UK. It's just, the UK is paradise to come to because, just quite frankly, losers will go to the UK without any ambition, nothing going for them, and they'll just want to take from the government because historically we've got a reputation of just giving people what they want. And that has to change before you can start sorting any problems out, really.
I think it's well, maybe now you have that reputation, but historically you have a reputation of being an empire where, the sun never set on the British Empire. And now, unfortunately, for the regular British person who's a hard worker, and I've said this before, every country has, and many people say this, every country has good people and bad people. And the regular person, all they care about is making sure that their kids grow up to be good outstanding citizens, that they're fed, they're safe, and from what I can tell, that's not... From what I can tell, it's extremely windy and the camera's falling. Hold on. There's good people and there's bad people. And in the UK, just like in Russia, people want to make sure their kids are fed, are clothed, are happy, they have a bright future. Unfortunately, you're no longer that empire that the sun never sets upon, the country that provides everything it needs for its citizens. It feels like you're providing a lot for the migrants, and your citizens can't even walk around with the British flag without the threat of being arrested for offending someone. How did it come to that? How did, in 30 years you went from a country where a British person could be proud of being British to a country where you can't even march with your own flag without being called an extremist?
No, because, and even when I say, historically, I was talking very much about recent history, because this has been going on, even the last 10, 15 years, even longer. This has still been going on. It's not been perhaps as noticeable, but it's definitely been going on. I think we're very much the puppets of the US. I think a lot of this sort of started in the United States, as everything does. And it's funny with the Trump administration, we seem to then even now be kind of going our own way in between sort of Keir and his buddy Macron. They're trying to kind of create a whole different path, but that is something else. Like, the UK, yes, it used to be known, and I think a lot of people do still consider the UK as somewhere that's rich, somewhere that's prosperous, somewhere that they want to move to. What I would say to anyone is, look, the grass is not green on the other side, and people unfortunately are going to be very disappointed when they've had a build-up of dreams for the whole life that the UK is this amazing, wonderful place. It's maybe okay to go and visit once a year and see Buckingham Palace or whatever they want to see, but it's not a place where you can build a decent career anymore. You can provide for your family anymore. It's just it's really not. The cost of living is extremely high. The wages are extremely low. What wages you do make, pretty much half of your money is going to the government anyway. And perhaps that would be okay if you were getting the right sort of level of return on investment from that money. But the fact is, you're going to work super hard, and then your money's just going to go into a Ukrainian politician's pocket so their wife can go to the south of France and become one of Cartier's best customers. But it's true. I mean, we laugh about it, but it's incredibly true. I mean, even in Dubai, I saw some of these politicians and their daughters, for example, getting richer and richer. There was one case I know of, a Ukrainian politician buying 3 villas on the Palm for 3 of their daughters. That level of wealth wasn't there before. Where is this money coming from? It's coming from the West, because we're so stupid to actually see that. And we're just giving them cash. We're not even giving them weapons anymore. We're just giving them a blank checkbook. And yeah, I'm pretty glad in terms of the US, what Trump's doing. He's actually putting his foot down, and at least he's not scared to actually, say this and protect the public purse. But the UK isn't doing that, and we're starting to go our own way, and we're not actually looking, like I said before, at the fundamental issues of the country. We're continuously trying to sort everyone else's problems out, and that is just completely ruining the country. It's ruining our history, it's ruining our heritage, and it's just not the same as it once was. Because growing up, I thought the UK was an incredible place. I felt proud to be British. I felt proud to hold a British passport, and it was such a desirable thing to have this passport that I could travel freely. I could go to pretty much any country in the world without a visa, and they were good times. But not anymore, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I have a question for you, and this is getting a little bit more political than we've already been. I mean, we kind of have been talking about politics anyway. But I mean, the question that I have is, unfortunately, what's coming from the UK government is kind of worrying for anyone living in Russia, because Keir Starmer recently, this is according to Sky News, he said that the UK, and I'm completely probably kind of using the wrong words, but should be getting ready for war, or should be preparing for war. What is the UK is funding the Ukrainians. Everyone knows this.
Yeah.
What is the end goal? What is the point of funding a war for a country that is not even part of NATO? What's the end goal? What do they want?
Well, so they say, look, I'll give you an example. I mean, Keir Starmer, him and the Labour Party, pretty much, when you ask him or any politician pretty much in the UK, what's the number one risk to humanity right now? You know what they say?
Russia. Right?
Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
That is literally what they say. And they're funneling money into it like no one's business, just completely going over the top and saying, look, it's national security for Europe. They think Putin wants to creep into Europe and take the whole of Europe back, and that's what their concerns are. The reality is completely different, but they've just got this warped mindset that is the fundamental issue, and that's where where money needs spending on defence and on Ukraine.
But what is the end goal? Is it to control the local population of the UK? Is it to take money from the taxpayer pockets? Is the end goal to hope that Russia falls to be able to get all the natural resources for free?
Well,
like there has to be some kind of goal.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone in Russia knows. I mean, obviously, you know, what's going on in Ukraine, it's a special military operation. But where the war comes in is it's a war against the West, right? It's a war against the Western nations that are just completely anti-Russia, against Russia. They're creeping in with NATO. They're putting, you know, warships, you know, on Russia's border. Now, I don't see that there is anything wrong with Russia defending themselves when that kind of activity goes on by these Western countries. If Russia is putting warships, you know, on the coast of Scotland, for example, or flying over the UK with fighter jets and all the rest of it, like, the UK isn't going to be happy. Or the same goes for the US. Russia is literally standing up for themselves and defending their country. But the UK doesn't see that. And again, it's completely twisted because, you know, it's fine for the UK to defend themselves. But when it comes to Russia, no, they're not allowed to defend themselves. And I don't understand why there's that difference between what they're allowed to do and what Russia's allowed to do. You know, Russia is one of the really one of the biggest superpowers in the world. You know, Russia and you know and the United States, and they're not treated with the respect they deserve. You know, the US is. You know, they're sort of best buddies with the US. Now, why isn't Russia? Why is Russia treated completely differently? Historically, you know, the UK had a lot of ties with Russia. You know, like, you know, Russians study there quite a lot. You know, if you go into any of the major sort of construction developments in London, half of it's owned by Russians. There's investment coming from Russia, like I say, education. If you go back to the time of the Tsars, you know, there's even, relationships going on between, the UK royal monarchy and
family,
and
basically, yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of history there, and it's, pretty sad that it's gone downhill. And I guess it started 2013, 2014. And, the first lot of sanctions actually went, way back then. A lot of people don't realise that. The sanctions now really have just got stronger from what was already in place.
Correct.
There's a very long way to go, I think, until it's going to get back to the way it was. I think it just needs the government to be a bit more open-minded. That's what it needs. And now when I'm saying Western governments as well, I'm not really talking about the US, because I think the US now is being a lot more neutral. I mean, we'll see what actually happened in terms of the peace talks and
correct.
Trump's involvement with things. I think it's probably too early to say yet that everything's going to be completely okay. But at least Trump is trying to end the conflict in Ukraine, and at least he's actually trying to bring parties together and negotiate a good outcome for everyone. The UK doesn't even want to entertain that. Europe doesn't even want to entertain that. They just keep spending money. They keep promising more money. They keep promising, this ongoing commitment. Now, you ask about the end goal. I don't know what the end goal is, because, for example, how can you promise to give someone money for 100 years? I mean, 10 years is a long time. 20 years is a long time.
You think it's empty promises or what?
Yeah, I really don't know how. It's absolutely absurd, because, what is his end goal if he thinks Ukraine is going to not be able to support themselves financially in 100 years? Surely, like any country, you need to grow an economy, you need to build something, and you need to earn your own money. Well, that's clearly not happening, and we're promising things I don't believe that we can keep, to be honest, because how can you? It's just stupidity.
You did move here during the special military operation, during the war, whatever you may want to call it. And you were part of the British government. You had your businesses in the UK. I mean, do you feel like you've gone to the other side? Do you feel like you're betraying your country by doing this? Or do you see it in some other way?
Absolutely not. I know that they don't see it in that way. There's been quite the reaction in terms of certain bank accounts getting frozen.
Yours?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's been a, I would say, a personal attack on me, with bank accounts getting frozen, some assets getting frozen. It's absurd that is going on and that has been allowed to happen. But yeah, they're trying to cancel pretty much anyone that wants to, in their view, like you said, side with Russia. Now, for me, it wasn't about siding with anyone. You know, I haven't come here to completely slag off the UK. I know some of the things online that I've done comes across in that way, but that isn't really what I'm doing at all. You know, I'm merely showing people that life isn't all that it seems. You know, the media isn't all that it seems in the West. And on my channel, for example, we're literally just talking about some of the things that we're getting up to in the daily life, you know, here in Russia. Not really talking about politics or anything else, but showing people that there's something different here that people perhaps aren't familiar with in their own countries. People don't know that it is very normal here. I mean, I personally moved here for, you know, the fact that my wife is Russian. We had an issue with the UK government and her visa, etc. You know, we pretty much, you know, had to come here. But that isn't me being forced to come here. I mean, I had a lot of places I could have moved to. I'm telling you, I could have gone to Dubai, I could have gone back to Asia. There was a lot of options.
And in fact, if you went to Dubai or Asia and you just opened up your channel and you were living there, they wouldn't even shut down your bank accounts. They wouldn't do anything because you're just moving to another country. They wouldn't even care.
Well, you say that. Look, the UK goes around saying, oh, look, we pride ourselves on freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, I'm sorry, has been completely cancelled a long time ago. There isn't freedom of speech anywhere in the world now. I feel freer in Russia than I ever did in the UK. There's people going to prison for years for the most petty things, yet there's violent crime happening on the streets. You know, we can't stop the violent criminals, the murderers, the people that need to be locked up. Yet people speak out about immigration issues. People speak out about the woke culture and about the various genders that people want to be called. You know, you speak out about that, or I say that I want to be known as a cat, and you fail to identify me as a cat. Yeah. You could be thrown in prison. You know.
So would you say then the UK right now, unfortunately, is ruled by the will of the small minority of, like, the fringe minority who want to be viewed as cats and the other gender, and it seems that even though I agree with you, there's no absolute freedom of speech anywhere. Definitely not in Dubai, definitely not in Russia, definitely not in the UK. However, here, if you say what the majority actually thinks, there'll be nothing wrong with you. You're not going to get arrested, you're not going to get taken away. However, in the UK, for example, I know that somebody went and protested in front of an abortion, no, not even protested, prayed in their heads in front of an abortion clinic, and they got arrested for it. Now, to me, that's absurd, because I believe that the majority of English and the majority of the American people and the Canadian people and et cetera, are normal human beings that just want happiness for their families and want to live and prosper and not be part of the woke culture. But so would you agree that the UK right now is ruled by this tiny fringe minority?
Yeah, look, I think in the UK, I think things are changing. I think there is a huge amount of people that are rebelling against this woke ideology that the government backs and the government supports, which is why I think a lot more people now are looking for other options, and a lot more people are looking to places like Russia to relocate to, because they're fed up with these ideologies that their governments are supporting. They're seeing the governments, like, they're seeing their countries completely going downhill, money not being spent on the right things, this kind of woke culture everywhere, and they've had enough. You know, they look to a country like Russia and think, actually, that's a place where I want to bring my children up, actually knowing that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and you've got politicians here that aren't scared to say that. You know, the UK, politicians can't even say this in public. They're asked on the news, what is a man? They can't say. Or they're too scared to say, because they're scared of being cancelled, and that's what happens to people that actually speak up for what's right or what they believe. And you haven't got a voice anymore in the UK. You know, I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, in Scotland, a man got committed to prison for rape. Went to a man's prison, said, I'm a woman. Got transferred to a female prison, raped a female. You know, like
it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous when you really think about it. But I mean, and there are other people like you who've come here and they've opened up their channels, and all they're doing is basically showing how Russia actually is. And do you understand why, in their eyes, in the eyes of Western governments, you are a threat to their way of existence? Have you ever thought about it? Do you understand why?
Well, yes and no, and that's why certain channels or certain people online are being cancelled more than others. Because as soon as you get too political, that's when things go completely wrong. You know, if it's just showing your life here, whatever. But the problem is, and speaking to quite a few, people that are sort of doing this out there, I think some are getting more frustrated than others, because people know that the things that actually build channels quicker and the things that get viewers more is talking about the politics, right?
Yeah.
Just going out talking about, oh, I did this today, this is my daily life in Russia, it doesn't make the money. So for people that want to do this kind of thing as a full-time job, they're then obviously forced into that hole, really, of actually going out there and doing the political stuff.
But I mean,
but in the end, it's a risky business.
But even before you get into that, you showing that we, as Russians, we're normal people walking around, there's people going on dates, there's pensioners over there eating, you showing your people that this is a normal place, that we enjoy having fun, we want to be everyone's friend, we want to make sure that we have a strong country, we want to make sure that we have normal values that ensure that we have a good, strong family here and a good, strong culture, and we want that. And you're showing that, and your friends and family are back in the UK looking at what's happening in your country. Obviously, even these little tiny videos where you're just showing regular people in Russia doing regular people things is a threat, because it destroys the narrative that's been spun by Western media that we are all bloodthirsty orcs just aching to beat up a Westerner or a British person because we hate all of you so much.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help their cause, for sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help their cause, and of course, no one's happy that any of us are sort of doing this or in this space or even moving here. I mean, there's been issues where people have got arrested going back to the UK for holding Sberbank bank cards, because it's a sanctioned bank, and technically if you're giving money to a sanctioned bank, you're indirectly funding the war or funding the military operation, shall I say, and therefore you could go to prison for breaking international sanctions. If you take an Aeroflot flight, if you take a Russian railway, etc., etc., again, you're breaking international sanctions, so they can imprison you. So they will use anything against any of us for doing any of this stuff. People that I talk to, whether it's YouTubers, whether it's just normal, regular foreigners that are here, people are scared of actually leaving the country right now. People are scared of going back to the UK or back to the US.
And these are citizens of the UK and the US.
Yeah. I've spoken to a number of people who are genuinely scared. I mean, I'm worried for other reasons, or a bit more sort of severe reasons, but because of my political past and some of the things I am saying online and speaking out, but even just normal people going about their daily lives, you know, they're, I guess, a little bit scared of going back because of their history here. You know, will they be stopped for hours at the airport? Will they be asked about what they were doing in Russia? Will they get arrested for having a bank account with a state-owned bank account? Completely ridiculous things to have to think about in today's world, but it's the reality of what people are going through.
All right, well, I mean, let's tone down the political a little bit, kind of. I'm curious, your friends and family, do they think you're nuts for coming here, or are they kind of neutral or positive, or what do they think about you actually moving to Russia?
It's a bit of both, really. Like, when you go to sort of my parents, no, I mean, there was a bit of anxiousness there, but of course they've known my wife for the last 5-6 years, so they've gotten to know a bit more about Russia, the way of life here, the culture here, everything else. So they kind of know the truth, and of course we speak to them regularly. We show them what Russia is like, you know. So when it comes to like my parents, my siblings, etc., they know, and you know, my brother's very much up for coming here. He's not been here yet, but he definitely wants to when he gets a chance. When it goes down to maybe more friends, I would say, probably more closed-minded than anyone actually. I mean, my family have been very supportive. When you go to sort of like normal, regular people in whether it's the UK or elsewhere in Europe, for example, they get a bit angry, you know, because they're very much a case of, look, you know, you're funding the Russian economy. You know, this isn't good because obviously funding the economy here, you're funding the operation in Ukraine. People get upset about this, you know, because they have a belief that you shouldn't be doing that. You should be funding Ukraine.
But I mean, shouldn't they be, and I'm talking about regular citizens of the UK, but shouldn't they be more worried about walking outside, and if they want to wear a nice watch, or if they want to look nice, or if they want to be able to pull money out of the ATM, shouldn't they be more worried about crime, knife crime? I mean, I've heard, and I've been to London. Thankfully, I'm here talking to you. I'm not an illusion or a ghost, so I'm alive. I mean, it's not as dangerous as some people make it out to be. However, it's still called the knifing capital or stabbing capital of Europe, which I don't even know if it's true or not. But I mean, shouldn't they be more worried about these kinds of things and the healthcare system being underfunded than funding a conflict where the same basic person is offing, and I'm using YouTube language here, it's the same exact person who speaks a little bit of a different language with a little bit of an accent is basically offing the other one because of the interests of NATO. I mean, shouldn't your citizens be more worried about the well-being of the UK rather than Ukraine?
Well, they should. And this is why I don't really understand it, right? Because people, yeah, because there's different people, right? There's the ones that are actually starving that probably are thinking about eating or whatever, I guess. And then there's what you might call the middle class or the working class that are getting by. They may be living paycheck to paycheck. They maybe can afford 1 or 2 weeks holiday a year. But it's those people that are more sort of like against Ukraine or the situation in Ukraine, against Russia and what's going on. They seem satisfied just getting by in life, and they should be more worried about themselves. They should be more worried about their families and actually bettering their lives and bettering their families and you know, creating more wealth for themselves, and actually looking back and being worried about, oh, why haven't we got richer over the last 5 years? Surely there's a fundamental issue that needs changing because of that. But they're not, you know, they're worrying about this a whole other issue over there that shouldn't really concern them. People are getting concerned too much by this, because I'm telling you, look, at the end of the day, if NATO and Europe and the US completely pulled out and stopped funding Ukraine, life would still go on. You know, like, that life would still go on, and if anything, these people's lives will get better because money is being spent on the things that it should be spent on, improving your own country. And whatever will happen in Ukraine will happen in Ukraine. But really, it's for Russia and Ukraine to sort their issues out between themselves. Like, we're getting too involved now. And I'm sorry, like, 3 billion a year for 100 years. I mean, that's just, it's a complete and utter joke. When I first heard that, I'm like, what is this guy doing? Has he not seen the state of our country? And this is what we need to look at. And when people are voting in the next election, I really hope they turn to a party. I mean, I don't even know if we've got one. And I'm not going to name publicly who I think should be in, but it's probably not the party that I've supported all my life. Because I've seen how both parties have operated and both the mentalities of the leadership of both parties. And I don't think it's working. You need someone to come in and make a huge change, but not only that, you need to change the mindset of your regular sort of middle class citizen for that to be able to happen.
It's funny because we circled right back into politics.
I know
it's incredibly interesting to do so, and I'm like, hey, let's tone it down, let's make it a bit more relaxed, and all of a sudden we're back right at it. So I'm going to slow it way down because we're coming to the end of the our talk here, the interview. I mean, what do you miss most, being a British guy? Regular British guy, English guy, living in Russia, in Moscow? What do you miss most about from the UK, for example? Besides your family, like, is there something that...
Yeah, so I was going to say, there's the obvious things like that, but in terms of actually my life and living my life on a daily basis between sort of what I've got in the UK and what I've got here, not a lot really, because, you know, think about what you can't get here, or look at, you know, since the start of 2022, you know, what can't you get here? You know, yes, brands are pulled out of the market. You know, there's, you know, whether it's Stars Coffee or McDonald's or whatever. But I'm telling you, I mean, I've tried some of these brands, and arguably the brands that have taken it over are better than the original American
in some
crap
cases,
that was there in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would say in a lot of cases, I mean, I've not tried all of them, but I mean, take fresh fruit and vegetables, for example. I mean, I was at the market the other day buying some Uzbek tomatoes, for example. Tastiest tomatoes ever. You can't get that quality of produce in the UK or most places that I've lived in. The sanctions haven't really affected people, I don't think, here in the way that the West would have liked. We've got our own banking system here now. We've got obviously the MIR system. Yes, it can be challenging at times to move money in and out of the country, but people have figured that out. It's not the end of the world. But in terms of living their lives on a daily basis, it's not hurting anyone now, really, I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe I'm just talking from my own experiences. But I don't think there's anything here. I mean, personally, I know there's nothing, you know, in Russia, really, that I can't get. Maybe proper authentic fish and chips by the seaside somewhere in
yeah, probably. I mean,
maybe.
If you go out all the way out east to Vladivostok,
Maybe.
perhaps you'll get, because they're very big on, I mean, they have huge crabs that sometimes they just catch right there by the ocean. Probably, or the sea, you'll probably be able to get authentic fish and chips, I'm sure.
Well, that is the thing, right? Because the other thing as well, when people think about Russia, you know, they just think snow and ice, Moscow, St. Petersburg, right? Actually, there's 9 different time zones, east to west, you know, in Russia. And yes, you're right. If you go to Kamchatka, I mean, there's amazing seafood, for example, in these sorts of areas on the border of Japan. But people don't know that there's that much variety and that much to do when it comes to all of these different time zones, all of these different places across Russia. And yes, you know, this thing, but even like, I mean, you'll see on, you know, this weekend, I've got an episode coming out with expat American who I know you know, and we were just sat in an American diner, the Beverly Hills diner.
Over on the old Arbat Street?
Yeah, exactly. And he was telling me how authentic it was, proper American food here in Russia. You know, you can get everything here, whether it's American food. I haven't really looked for proper, I mean, what is English food, whether it's fish and chips or full English
blood pudding or blood
black pudding, I think, yeah, with your full English. I'm sure you can though. I mean, there's British pubs here, isn't there? You know, pub food and whatever else. if you want a sense of normality, if that's the word, you can look for it. There is this stuff here. I mean, like I said, there's pubs, there's bars. I think you were with Scottish guy in Moscow, and with Joe, weren't you, in a Scottish pub? There's Irish pubs. There's something for everyone here. People can find what they're looking for if they do kind of miss a bit from back home, or they need their fix. They can get it.
Exactly. But to be as unbiased as humanly possible, so the sanctions did, in a way, I mean, they really changed life here in Russia. For example, we have a lot more Chinese cars. We don't have, we still get a lot of new European cars, not as much as before, and they're going through other countries, but we have so many different Chinese brands. It feels like every month there's a new Chinese brand on the road somewhere. To me, they just turned a good thing, a vehicle, a symbol of freedom, into an iPhone, into a phone. For me, they all look the same, they all act the same. I could be wrong, but things have changed. We have had an increase in the cost of living as well. Of course, inflation is here in Russia. But it's not catastrophic. We're living normally here. We're adapting. In fact, the Russian economy, because it's gone through so many different ups and downs and changes and catastrophes over the course of 30 years, people aren't too phased, and they learn how to adapt and they learn how to move on. Whereas, for example, in the States or in Canada, there's a little tiny quarter of a percentage of increase in the rate for loans, and everyone starts to panic, and there's a recession and people are selling off and everything. So it has affected us, but not to the extent that people would like to see it affect us, for sure.
I would say that. I mean, because that's the thing, right? Look, if you ask me, what perhaps isn't so good about here, and what has.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. What is difficult for you to get used to, or what can't? For example, what makes your life difficult besides being able to or not moving money out and moving money into the country? What else is difficult for you?
Yeah, I mean, no, there isn't a lot of things, but I guess a couple of things. The bureaucracy here in terms of dealing with government departments, dealing with paperwork, all of that kind of stuff. Having lived in Dubai and seeing how quick stuff was. I've been fortunate to live in Moscow city district. I'm told if I lived in Moscow Oblast or further out, it would be even worse than
some people say it's actually easier to be able to get your not citizenship, but documents outside of Moscow. But
really?
Some people say it's easier here. Some people say it's easier. It depends who you get, where you are, and you know what? Government workers, to be honest with you, no matter how much you want them to smile and to behave and to be the best possible customer service agents, in any country that I've been to, most government workers and post office workers are exactly the same. They're not really happy to see you, and they're not really happy for you to be there, and they want you out as soon as possible. I'm unfazed by it. I just believe that that's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, you've probably not had to go to Sakwaha, for example.
Oh yes, my wife is from Bulgaria. Believe me, I've been there 8 times. I know exactly what you mean.
All right, so you know what I mean. I mean, you walk past the toilets, and you just got to hold your nose. And
oh, you've never been inside those toilets, the outdoor ones?
Well, I had to pee in them to get my.
It feels like you've eaten a sandwich of whatever is in the toilet, but is in the air. Just you walk in and it's disgusting. Yeah,
exactly. Then it's just crazy. Then there's all these different rooms you've got to go in for the medical. I mean, if I didn't have a Russian wife and I was on my own, I don't know how I would have got through.
No idea.
They're not allowed in if you're not married. You would have to go on your own. So it's So that side of things and dealing with government stuff does need to improve. And I have had conversations with certain people to try and pass that message on, and I am told that things are going to be improved
slowly
in that area. But like anywhere, things take time, because even if, for example, Maria Bettina has a really good plan in terms of how to improve this for people coming on the 702 scheme. Like working within politics in the UK, I know if you have an amazing idea in Parliament, it would take you probably years to sort of pass that through. And even when a law gets approved, to actually have that enacted on the front line, exactly how you vision it from the top, it can be a difficult one. But anyway, that's maybe kind of one area. Of course, I'm a property guy from the UK, right? So I'm always like, okay, so I'm coming to a new place. How can I kind of do a similar sort of thing, right? You probably know from your time in Canada and things, how easy it is to buy a property under, they call it sort of the BRR method in terms of buying a property, refurbishing it, flipping it or refinancing it on a cheap mortgage, renting it out, having the rent pay the mortgage, giving you a bit of cash flow, reinvest the money in the next one, building up a portfolio. The market here isn't really geared up for that sort of thing, and especially when you've got mortgages at 25, 30%.
It's insane.
You just can't borrow money. Now,
but it doesn't even make sense, because I know we're getting into finances, but at this rate, because I've done the calculations, for example, even if you were to get an apartment and get it at a 30% rate, which is ridiculous, you're better off just putting that money in the bank, because the bank is going to give you 20, 22%. The bank is going to give you this amount that's probably going to be bigger than you buying the apartment and renting it out. I've done the calculation.
That's the thing. You might as well put the money in the bank and use the interest to pay rent on quite a nice apartment.
Yeah.
Right. It just doesn't add up to be an investor here, really. What is good that I have noticed in terms of if you have children here, there is a family mortgage.
Yep.
So that, I believe, gives up to 12 million in Moscow, or like the bigger cities, I think it's 12 million, maybe outside is slightly less.
I don't know what the details are, but there is
6% interest, and obviously the government subsidises that with the bank, so you pay a lot less. So I've calculated on a mortgage of 12 million, it's basically 70,000 rubles a month, which is obviously going to be probably much cheaper than your rent. So there is good things like that, and the government here is very, very geared towards families.
Yeah.
As soon as you involve children, having children. I mean, I was shocked to learn that the government gives a down payment, I think it's 700,000 or 800,000 rubles. Plus they give about 70,000 rubles a month for the first 3 years of the child's life. I don't know all the details, but I heard something like that.
So it's 700 for the first kid, 800 something for the second, I can't remember for the third, and there's lots of different other benefits, like at least in Moscow you get free parking, you get, for example, right now, once a month we get a packet of milk, which actually tastes better than even, you can buy it in a shop, but it's milk especially for kids and I guess for pregnant women. But it's incredibly tasty.
Like the formula?
No, not formula, legit milk and legit juice. And you get that once a month. Everyone, no matter how much they earn, gets that once their wife is pregnant, for example. There are different kinds of benefits. They're not as easy to get, and they're not supposed to be easy to get, because you don't want everyone coming and faking that they have 15 children.
The other thing as well, though, I heard, the more you earn, the more benefits you get, or the more salary you have, the more benefits you get.
No. For now, we have almost a flat tax rate, which is extremely different than from most European countries. Bulgaria has a flat tax rate as well. Here, the reason why I say it's almost flat is that if you earn more than a certain amount, and it's a high amount, then you have to pay an additional, I think, 2% on top of that 13% tax rate. Either 2 or 5, I can't remember. But either way, you can always open up your own sole proprietorship here and only pay 4%. And there's another scheme for 6%, and then 6 plus 1 if you earn more than a certain amount per month. The taxes are, even though people like to do math incorrectly and they like to add the 30% that the companies pay for you if you're working for them, which is incorrect. And I'm not going to get into why that's incorrect. If anyone wants the formula, I'll put it in the comments. But the taxes are extremely, in this case, much lower than a lot of European nations. However, I mean, we've been talking for quite some time. It's actually more than an hour for sure. Right. I'm really hoping there's charge left on that particular camera. But something that I do in all of my interviews is I call it an open microphone. Basically, it's your time. You can say whatever you want, however you want. You can say hi to people. You can sing a song, recite a poem, your favorite quote, or tell people if they want to move, they should do X, Y, Z. Whatever comes to mind. It's your open microphone. I'm going to give you like a minute to think about it, and then you can go ahead and say whatever it is you want to say on camera. Cool?
Cool. Russia, I believe, is a very, very misunderstood country. Growing up, I had absolutely no idea about Russia. I didn't know anything about it. I had only heard probably very negative things on the news, and I've ended up in Russia. What I would say is, I've actually found that coming here to Russia, it's completely different. Like I've said previously, like I've said online, like I've said pretty much everywhere since I've come here to Russia. it's totally different, and you need to come here to experience it for yourself. I've been fortunate to come here with a Russian wife who's helped me with quite a lot coming here, but I've understood that actually there's a lot of things in terms of moving here and the process that foreigners are going to be very challenged by. I've actually set up a company since coming here to help people with that move and to actually help support them, especially when it comes to things like real estate and buying property and renting property and needing registrations and certain things to help facilitate that process. I've also set up an online platform, Moscow Connect, including the YouTube channel, not only to promote the business, but also to bring real life Russian life to people watching back at home, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in the US, Australia, any of these unfriendly countries, because like I say, Russia is a place that has so much variety, so much history, so much culture. There's so much to this country. And like I said, it's always misunderstood. And like I say to anyone, you need to come here and check it out for yourselves to actually understand what the place is really like. Thank you.
Unfortunately, my idea of having a nice little, nice interview recorded on my phone and on the camera, unfortunately the plan didn't work. Unfortunately, even though it's extremely beautiful to film outside, you do end up hearing all kinds of different noises. So I want to thank everyone who stayed till the end of the interview. Of course, like, subscribe, dislike, comment. You can always check out his channel. It's going to be in the description below. Again, thank you very, very much. If you do want to support the channel, just share the video, show it to your friends, and of course, comment, again, like and subscribe. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ciao.